Hi, this is Lee from the Law School Toolbox. So, what is the law school process? What do lawyers argue about? And where does the law even come from? Law school learning is a process and something that requires patience and consistent attention. Sadly, you can't easily cram for a law school test the way you could in undergrad. There are 4 distinct steps in the process, and each one is important. 1, absorb. 2, ponder. 3, practice. And 4, perform. So let's talk about each one in more detail. Step 1, absorb. You'll have a lot of information thrown at you in law school. The first step is to simply absorb everything without worrying too much about whether it all makes sense. Particularly first semester, students often get demoralized because they feel like they're not getting it. This is normal and isn't a reason to give up. Just keep doing the reading and going to class, and you'll figure out what's going on in the next step. Now, some sources of information you'll encounter include cases. Most of what you learn in law school will come via cases. But it's easy to be misled about what exactly you're supposed to be learning from each case. Stay tuned, we'll talk more about that. Class discussion. One of the best sources of information in law school is your professor. Why? Well, because that's who's grading your exam. Their concerns should be your concerns. Commercial supplements. Some people scoff at commercial supplements, such as hornbooks or commercial outlines. Those people are crazy. Used responsibly, commercial supplements can enhance your understanding and accelerate your learning. You just can't rely on them too heavily. Old student outlines. Yes, it's true. You will be able to find old student outlines for most law school classes. Now, these can be useful, but don't overestimate their powers. We'll talk about each one of these in more detail later in a different podcast. But for now, just realize that you'll probably feel overwhelmed in the beginning. There's a lot to learn, so make a commitment to keep up with the reading in the first semester, even if things don't come together or make sense immediately. Be patient, and they'll eventually gel. But your brain needs the raw materials to work with, which means you really need to do your reading. Step 2, ponder. Once you've absorbed sufficient information, it's time to start making sense of it. In this step, you'll take all of the information you've absorbed from your cases, class, supplements, etc., and go over it until it makes sense to you. Then you'll record everything you've learned and taught yourself so that you can reference it later when you're studying for exams. So fundamentally, we're talking about 2 sub-steps. Thinking, which is shaping all of your raw materials into a coherent understanding of the law with an eye towards being able to apply your knowledge. And recording, creating quality outlines and other study materials to ensure you're ready for exam day. Each one of these is critical, so we'll talk about both in detail later. Step 3, practice. A common law school myth is that you have to wait until you're finished with each course to start practicing for exams. This is not true. In fact, if you wait until the end of the course, it is much too late, especially if you are in your first year of law school. Why? Because legal exam writing is a learned skill. Law school exams are unique, and it doesn't matter how well you did in school previously. If you don't deliberately practice your legal writing, you won't be successful. Law school exam writing is actually fairly formulaic, but you have to get used to the formula. The sooner you do this, the better. And the only way to get used to it is to practice. We'll talk more about the formula in a later podcast. So remember, practice early, practice often, seriously, you'll thank us later. Step 4 is to perform. Once you've practiced and time's run out, it's game time. All of your reading, thinking, outlining, and practicing comes down to one thing: the exam. There's a lot riding on the few hours you actually spend taking law school exams each semester. Not to worry. With advanced preparation, you can go into exams feeling well prepared and ready with strategies for handling whatever your professor throws at you. Before we move into the nitty-gritty details of law school exams, let's consider a few foundational topics so you'll understand what lawyers argue about and what law typically applies in law school. So what do lawyers argue about? Law school makes a lot more sense when you think about what it is that lawyers routinely argue about. And by lawyers, I mean litigators, since that's what law school is teaching you to be. When you understand what lawyers do on a daily basis, you'll be better equipped to read cases actively, with an eye to the types of arguments you'd make if you were representing someone. So let's break it down. Lawyers argue about whether a certain case, with a given holding, is relevant to this new set of facts. If you want the case to apply, you'll argue for a broad holding. If you want to distinguish your facts from unhelpful precedent, you'll argue for a narrow holding. Lawyers argue about what the facts are and what they mean. Lawyers argue about what the law is and what it should be. Now, what do law students argue about? What do you do in law school classes and on exams? You argue about what the law is. You argue about what the facts are. You argue about what the facts mean. And when you're out of other things to argue about, you argue about public policy, also known as what the law should be. This old adage sums it up. When the facts are against you, argue the law. When the law is against you, argue the facts. And when the facts and the law are both against you, argue policy. Worth keeping in mind as you move forward in your legal career. Okay, that's all we have time for today. If you're starting law school soon and want some personalized help to feel confident on day one, check out startlawschoolright.com for details of our Start Law School Right course, and subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Alison at lee@lawschooltoolbox.com or allison@lawschooltoolbox.com, or you can always contact us via our website contact form at lawschooltoolbox.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk soon.